Foundation for the Defense of Democracy's Mariam Wahba standing by. This is something that we're going to be tracking, no doubt, overnight. And Mariam, I want to start with this post. The AP saying that Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has said that Israel will face, quote, severe punishment after it launched strikes that targeted the country's nuclear program and left the leader of Iran's paramilitary Revolutionary Guard dead. The leader of Iran's paramilitary Revolutionary Guard, how significant of a loss is that for Iran?
Good to be with you tonight, Austin. Look, there's incoming information at a speed greater than we can begin to explain. And obviously, once the dust begins to settle, we'll be able to explain a lot more what exactly has been targeted and successfully hit by the Israelis. If it is confirmed that the IRGC commander-in-chief has been successfully eliminated by the Israelis, this will be a major success for them. Obviously, there's a lot of decision-making apparatuses that the Israelis have been going after, and this is a major one.
What are you going to be watching for when we eventually see, and I should also mention that the majority of the time we've been watching these live images from the region. This is a live image of Jerusalem. The sun is now up. We've seen a response from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. We've seen a brief statement posted by the IDF. What other entities are you going to be watching for comment for? Obviously, one person I'm going to be looking for comment from is President Trump. What are you going to be watching for?
I think what will be most interesting in the coming hours as we begin to learn more about the Israeli strikes is what and who exactly has been targeted successfully. Obviously, the nuclear sites are the big red dot on the X mark, and that's what the Israelis ought to be going after. But really, where have they been successful? So I'm going to be looking for missile sites, missile salvos, where they're holding a lot of the missiles, and obviously the nuclear scientists, the brains that kind of make the bombs, that are able to put together the pieces of the puzzle for the Iranians. Those will be the important targets for the Israelis. And if they can confirm that they have been successfully targeted, that'll be a huge win for them.
If the IDF had intelligence to suggest where they wanted to strike in order to minimize some of what they were targeting today, why did they wait until now to do it?
That's the million-dollar question. I mean, we've seen the last couple of weeks, really precisely 2 months, the Trump administration engage in negotiations with the Ayatollah to, some successes, not so many successes. And we've seen messaging from the White House and the State Department on how exactly they want to negotiate with the Ayatollahs. The most recent messaging from the White House earlier today, just a couple hours before the Israelis began their strike, was that the Trump administration wants to go back to the negotiating table with Tehran. How does this strike change that equation for the White House is yet to be determined.
I mentioned that I'm waiting for a statement from the White House, from President Trump himself. We did get a statement from Secretary of State. Rubio said, "Tonight, Israel took unilateral action against Iran. We are not involved in strikes against Iran, and our top priority is protecting American forces in the region. Israel advised us that they believe this action was necessary for its self-defense. President Trump and the administration have taken all necessary steps to protect our forces and remain in close contact with our regional partners. Let me be clear," he says. Iran should not target U.S. interests or personnel. What U.S. interests or personnel are in the region?
Great question. There's a couple of things. Obviously, in the last 2-3 days, we've seen the State Department move American diplomats out of different embassies all over the region. And obviously, that is a no-go for the Iranians. Absolutely, they should not be targeting American diplomats anywhere really in the world, but particularly in the region. I think the second important thing, and that's less talked about, is almost every capital in the Middle East tonight is celebrating what the Israelis have accomplished and will accomplish over the next few hours. None of the Arab states, none of the Sunni Arab states want Tehran to have that nuclear arms. Want to see Iran have nuclear weapons. And what the Israelis are doing is putting all of these capitals at ease, from Egypt all the way across the region. And I think that'll be a big success for the region.
If history is any indicator, is the region itself dangerous for the time being?
I mean, absolutely. Since the October 7th attack by Hamas on Israeli civilians, we've seen waxes and wanes of escalation and de-escalation, and the Israelis are masters at this game, escalating to de-escalate. But what's important about tonight, and what's really important to understand for the American public, is the Israelis had no chance. We are getting intelligence reports indicating that the Iranians were closer than ever to a nuclear bomb, and this is the Israelis' backyard. Obviously, Israel is America's closest ally in the region, and to have a rogue regime that seeks to destruct the state of Israel and eventually come after us, the American people, was a non-starter for Israel and America, of course.
Let's do a little bit of History 101 here. Let's say in the past 2 or 3 U.S. presidents, what have been the main threads that we've been following as far as Iran's nuclear program goes? What have been the waxes and wanes of their nuclear program in recent years?
Absolutely. I mean, the Americans, we have taken out nuclear scientists, we have taken out Iranian leaders. Obviously, the most notable is Soleimani under President Trump's first term, and we've seen different presidents be able to manage the Iran nuclear threat in different means, whether it was the JCPOA or, like I noted, taking out Soleimani. So we've seen different tactics. I think what's most interesting about President Trump's approach is his communication style, how he's able to communicate with the Ayatollah, the mullahs in Iran, and be clear and direct that they ought not to have a nuclear weapon that threatens Israel, the Middle East, or anywhere else in the world.
So we've been looking at this statement that's been released through Iranian media. And one thing, and I'm curious if our producers can get Khamenei's statement back up. We had it up a moment ago. There it is, the AP putting this out. This is something that Alon Burstein alluded to before. I want to ask you about this. Khamenei said that Israel will face severe punishment. Do you also see what I'm seeing there? Does it stick out to you that the U.S. was not involved in this statement? Mariam.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing to note. When the IRGC chants death to Israel, they also chant death to America and death to the West. They see our way of life as incompatible with theirs. And since the 1979 Islamic Revolution, the goal of the regime has been to export the Islamic Revolution, what they see as the founding blocks of life for not just Iranians, but the entire region and the entire world. Them not including Americans in this statement, I take it or leave it. I don't necessarily, take what the Ayatollahs say word for word here. And we've seen them react certain ways to Israeli escalation. I think what's really important to remember here is the Israelis act out of necessity, where the Ayatollahs act out of evil.
What do we need to know about the Ayatollah? There's a lot of people who might be watching right now that don't cover the day-to-day of this conflict like you and I do. What do people need to know about him?
Look, the Ayatollahs are different from the Iranian people. What we've seen over the last 2-3 years is the Iranian people, the Persian people, rise up against the Islamic revolutionary regime that has oppressed and maintained such an authoritarian dictatorship over the people for years now, going on 45, 46 years. And I think the American people ought to know that the regime and the people are two separate entities. And we at FTD have been advocating for a maximum pressure campaign against the regime and a maximum support campaign for the Iranian people so that they may take the opportunities that Israel and America afford them to topple the regime.
What more, if you could expand, what more do you feel, and by the way, this is not live, these are images we're playing back of the aftermath of the strikes. We've also got video of at least a portion of the strikes themselves. But I'll ask you the same question about the Iranian people. If you could expand on it, what do people need to know about the general public of Iran?
That's a great question. I mean, most of what we know about the general public of Iran is friendly to the U.S. and, in fact, friendly to Israel and the Jewish people. A lot of them support Israel and really despise the Iranian regime and the way that they've handled life under the regime for the last 46 years or so under this Islamic version of life that they see. A lot of Iranians are, a lot of the Iranian diaspora in the U.S. support the maximum pressure against the regime and maximum support for the Iranian people. And I think it goes to show that that distinction between the regime and the Persian people is really there.
One more angle to all this. People have heard us cover the Gaza war every day since October 7th, 2023. One of the main angles to that story, we've always been covering Hezbollah. We've always been covering the Houthis. There's these Iranian proxies that always make their way into the story. Entities like the Houthis in Yemen, is that a group to keep an eye on in light of what's happened tonight?
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen Israel take out multiple of Iran's proxies, that what we call the octopus's arm, across the Middle East over the last 18 months, 600 days plus of war. But what we haven't seen yet is these proxies really decapitated, because they serve as proxies, and in their role as they are founded and funded by the Iranian regime, they can't really be decapitated unless the regime itself is decapitated. Unless the regime in Tehran is decapitated, more funding, more support will continue to flow to terrorist organizations like Hezbollah, like the Houthis, which continue to threaten not only Israelis but Americans. How many missiles and airstrikes have we seen by the Houthis against American positioning in the Red Sea and beyond?
This might be a tough question to answer, but just as a guy who follows this stuff, Yemen, the country, it's a rough place to be right now. And the Houthis don't appear to be the mightiest of militias, but still, they are causing quite a bit of havoc. Are you able to put into words why it is so difficult to decapitate a group like the Houthis?
Great question again. I mean, this is kind of the Iranian regime's proxy strategy. They prop up these militias, these paramilitias all over the Middle East and really all over the world in a way that doesn't actually need a functioning, working bureaucratic body the way that regular militia and paramilitia bodies need. When we see Israel take out leaders of the Houthis or Hezbollah or what have you not, other ones are ready to step up to the plate and become the leaders and the commanders of organizations like the Houthis and Hezbollah. And this is all part of Iran's strategy, kind of replace the parts of the body that go missing, replace the parts that Israel is able to assassinate and take out off the playing field, and keep the funding going so that more people are able to die for what the Islamic Republic sees as its grand mission of exporting the Islamic Revolution.
There are still hostages in Gaza, alive and dead, that have not been returned. The war itself has been going since October of 2023. How much of a tie is there between Hamas and Iran at this point? We know nothing comes in or out of Gaza. It's now been over a year and a half since the war started. How much of a connection is there at this point between Tehran and the head figures that are in the enclave?
That is a fascinating question. I mean, in the beginning of the war, the big conversation around Houthis and Hezbollah is, were there direct orders given from Tehran to Houthis and, to Hamas and Hezbollah to initiate this war? And I think we don't know enough to kind of give a definitive answer to that question. I think in the aftermath of this war, when all is said and done, more intelligence will be able to give us a clearer image of the days leading up to that attack. I think what's most important to understand about this critical moment is that the Islamic Republic sees Israel's strength and sees America's strength and is not backing down. So something here has to give. And I think a night like tonight is really a defining moment in this war and a defining moment for the region, where we see the Israelis stepping up and doing what needs to be done to continue to hit the Islamic Republic.
The guest that we had on before you mentioned the fact that, at least from the initial reports he was seeing, that there didn't appear to be any anti-missile defense systems. There had been no sort of defense capabilities that came out from Iran's side of things to try and take out any of what the IDF was carrying out tonight. How is the IDF able, and I don't expect you to give us all the tricks of the trade, but how is the IDF able to do what they do? How is it that their intelligence forces are able to do what they've called a precise strike right in the heart of the country?
There's two parts to this. First, to your point about the air defense systems, we saw Israel take out those air defense systems earlier this year, and over the last 18 months, slowly but surely chipping away at these the Tehran air defense systems, so that when the time comes, if the time comes, like tonight, the Israeli pilots can go over the skies of Tehran and strike where they need to with precision and with minimum civilian casualties, like we're seeing. So that's part of the equation for kind of the secret sauce for the IDF and for the Israelis. The second part of this that we know is the Israelis have massive human intelligence on the ground, and this goes to speak to just how much the Iranian people despise the regime and want to see its downfall. Regular Iranians on the streets of Tehran are assisting the IDF because they see that the IDF has the interests of the Iranian people and the region at heart.
Can't thank you enough for the time tonight. Mariam Wahba is with the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. We always rely on the FDD for important context, especially during times of breaking news like this. Thanks for staying up late with us. Take care.
Thank you.